Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of No Questions Left Behind. I'm Sam.
And I'm Stevie.
And today we're going to answer all of the questions that we didn't get to during our YouTube Live this week on basic polishing. So,
yeah, you guys were asking a lot of great questions in the chat. It was really hard to keep up with, and we've got quite a few to try and cover today. So,
yeah, try and cover. I think we have, I didn't count how many pages. So it's
like
7?
5.5.
6?
Yeah.
A lot of pages. So probably won't get to every last question. If we missed your question, we apologize. We're doing our best to get through as many as possible as we do our best to answer as many as we can on the live while also getting through all of the content that we have planned. But yeah,
Well, real quick, you do have 2 more days for the sale. $50, I almost 50%, and I was like, that's not right. $50 off of G9 and G9 kits to celebrate the 5-year anniversary of the G9's launch.
Yeah, Stevie trying to give away the farm over here. $50 off, not 50% off. 2 days left, so that one is up on Saturday. So get your orders in, save some money on the G9. Hard to believe it's been 5 years already. All right, let's go ahead and answer some questions. First question, Ruger's World, who asked a lot of great questions on our YouTube Live. What is the recommended polishing speed for an all-in-one product on the G9? So for like ceramic all-in-one or any liquid wax 3-in-1, any of those types of all-in-one products, you're gonna wanna sit between speed 4 or 5. I almost always will do the majority of my polishing at speed 5 unless I'm working on something really light. Rarely use speed 6 unless I'm going after severe defects. So typically you do not need to turn the machine all the way up to 6, but it's there if you need it.
Yep. Neil White asked, what would you recommend for those window panels as far as polishing? Prep the same way you would with the rest, so clean it and then decontaminate it as needed. And then as far as polishing, we recommend our fine glass polish, which uses cerium oxide, which is really effective but still gentle on glass surfaces, so it's going to remove those mineral etchings without potentially harming the glass. It is water-based also, which makes for easier wipe-off as opposed to the paint polishes, which can be a little streaky and smeary if you were to use those on the glass. And then use them with our glass polishing pads, which are a synthetic rayon material, which is going to be more aggressive than the paint pads to give you the most effective cut.
Chris Christensen asked, is pad stalling due primarily to using too much downward pressure? Partially, yes, but not entirely. So if you're applying even downward pressure, the pad shouldn't stall. To a point at least, and you'll get amped up defect removal that way. But from applying uneven downward pressure, specifically if you're wedging the pad by having the machine off camber from side to side, or if you're putting too much pressure with your backhand or leaning the machine forward on a flat surface, any wedging of that pad where you don't have the pad contacting the surface flat will tend to stall the machine or slow down rotation. It might not completely stall it, but will definitely slow it. And then uneven surfaces, if you're not approaching them correctly, and again, not keeping the pad flat to the paint surface, you're gonna get some slowed rotation or stalling. So if you're approaching an angle, you wanna heel or toe down into that angle or up onto that angle, depending on what type of angle or contour you're approaching. We showed some of that during the YouTube Live the other night, but say I'm doing a front to back line or angle on a contoured hood, which is common. Usually you'll go up it with one side of the machine and keep it flat to that angle, and then you'll polish the bottom of that contour with the opposite side. So take some finessing and some experience to get really good at that, but it's something you want to always keep an eye on. Make sure that you're seeing good pad rotation as you're working. If you do see the rotation slow down or stop, remove pressure or reduce pressure and ensure that that pad is sitting flat on the surface. A good way to do that on a flat panel, on a horizontal surface, is to just pull your hand off the top of the machine and remove any pressure from the back of the machine and just let it float. Make sure it's flat, and then you can reapply pressure as needed. But you never want to apply pressure on the handle of the tool. Always apply all of your pressure over the backing plate, over the top of the tool.
Yeah, I think as you're getting started too, you kind of figure out how to hold the machine, right? And part of that is that angle that you're speaking to. But I find that sometimes beginners will use the platypus head, and then that, for whatever reason, ends up in them wedging the pad more frequently. And so I find that using the actual finger grooves around the head, like you just had your hand there, really helps you find that center of gravity a lot easier.
Yeah, it's a great tip. So instead of gripping the machine like this, and you're gonna tend to want to either lean pressure too far forward or apply too much with your backhand. Grip that head like so, and keep your pressure off the backhand. This is really just to steer the tool around the surface, not to apply pressure. You can also, with the trigger locked, you can move your hand up here to apply even more downward pressure over the front of the tool as needed. So that's a very important part if you're just getting started out. Probably one of the things that people don't always notice they're doing wrong. If you're moving quickly and aren't paying attention to that pad rotation, and really having even pressure is going to amp up your results and allow you to get faster results. We get customers every once in a while that ask, like, I kept going over it and I'm not getting the defects out, or I'm not getting the results I expect. Most often it's because they're causing the rotation to slow down or stall by using uneven pressure.
Yeah, we're kind of getting off in the weeds here, but you made me think of something and I want to make sure that I call it out since this is a beginning polishing. But another thing too, ensuring that the pad is flat against the panel, is if you watch the path, the actual trail of product that you're leaving behind as you make your pass, making sure that it should be at least close to the sides of the pad that you're using. If you're seeing that you're using a 6-inch pad and you have about a 3-inch pass, it's probably that the pad isn't fully contacting the surface. And so that could be an instance where you polish, do your 3 to 4 sections, and some of it looks great, but there's these lines of defect still left in it, and that could be a reason why.
Yeah, great question, Chris. So to quickly answer that again, too much downward pressure alone won't typically cause stalling. It's unevenly applied downward pressure that you'll get that slowed pad rotation from.
Yes. Neil White asked, what do you recommend for pad cleaning between panels? We kind of touched on this last night, but from all the detailing I've done with you, I think that our preferred method is compressed air. We do also have the pad conditioning brush, which is also great and effective. And I did want to touch on also another question, just because we did talk about that a little bit last night. But Yvonne Boucher asked, will this video be posted on your site? I have a streaming issue going on, you're cutting in and out. And yes, not only will the live stream from last night be live on our YouTube channel, but this follow-up will also stay on our YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and reference this at any point, you can, or check out any of our other previous lives.
Good one. Mario asked, what pad is the best for all-around general use? I'd say pretty hands down our orange foam correcting pads. Those are right in the middle of the road. They're great for all-in-ones. They're great for moderate defects. Good starting point if you're just getting going. They're not overly aggressive, but they're strong or aggressive enough to get pretty decent results out of most paint finishes. So definitely orange correcting pad. If I only had one pad to do work with, that would probably be the one, because it's going to get you good results, but also finish down well, and it can be used with many of the products. Sometimes I'll even use the orange foam with like perfecting cream or a finishing product like complete polish to get a little more cut out of your finishing product in perfecting cream or complete polish, but still get a nice good finish. No haze usually caused by those pads. So.
Yeah, and that's a versatile enough pad that you can use it with, say, fast correcting cream to get a little more bite, but you can also use it with, say, an all-in-one if you want to do a one-step correction. So I agree that that's a good starter general pad.
It's the most common pad that you'll see in a lot of our kits, especially the more beginner kits.
Yes. Tom Texiera asked, are the backing plates included in the warranty, or are they disposable? So I wouldn't call them disposable. They are covered under the warranty if there's a defect with them. But there's kind of a gray area because they're covered if they're defective or if something goes wrong prematurely with them, but they are also a wear and tear item. It's normal that these are going to break down with extended periods of use. So if you have a backing plate that you've been using for years and it gave up, that is kind of a gray area where it may not be covered. So
yeah, I would say
keep that in mind. Maybe
really
not gray
depends
area.
on age and how much it's been used. You know, if you're getting delamination or something right out of the gate, yes, we're definitely going to cover you. If the backing plate is beat and tattered and, you know, been used a couple times a month for, you know, 2-3 years or something like that, or even more, it is a wear item, as Stevie said. So it is something that's going to need replacement eventually on a tool that's heavily used. So in that kind of case, it's not going to be covered under the warranty. Jace asked, dealing with fading from sun exposure, what's the best way to approach this? Oxidation or fading from UV exposure is very common, especially if you're in Arizona like you are. Really any of the states or climates around the country with a lot of sun, a lot of heat, you're going to be more at risk of that. Best way to approach it, depending on how bad it is, you know, there's varying degrees, so you can get UV degradation or oxidation that becomes so bad that the clear coat fails or the single stage paint fails and you can't bring it back. I'd say more often than not, you can do something about it though, and doing a test section on the surface with, say, correcting cream and one of those orange foam pads is going to give you a good idea of where you're at in terms of being able to fix it. You know, if that combo removes it, gets you back to a glossy surface, you know, you can either use that or step down to something even lighter. There are situations where I've had to go pretty aggressive on oxidation and go after it with like fast correcting cream and a microfiber pad, do a 2-step process to bring it back out to a full gloss. So really depends on the car and how bad it is, but usually you'll be able to bring it back.
Yes. SuperJed90 asked, how would you go about polishing outdoors if you don't have access to a garage, and what temps should you do it on? The closer to 70, the better. The further you get from that, either higher or lower, the more complications you could start enduring. And then working out of direct sunlight is going to be crucial. So I would say if you have any access to shade, definitely do it in shade. Earlier in the day and later in the evening when it's not quite as hot is also going to be the best way to go.
Yeah, you can also work on the side of the vehicle that's not in the sun, and then flip the vehicle around to stay working on the side that's not in the sunlight, depending on where the sun is relative to where you're working. But yeah, you're just going to face products drying up faster. It's definitely doable though. I mean, early on, when I started out detailing, the majority of the vehicles I did were outside. I'd say about 50% of the time, probably the customer, I did a lot of mobile stuff. I'd go over to somebody's house and they'd have it pulled out already, or they didn't have room in their garage for me to properly work around, probably the most common scenario. They might park in their garage, but you got just enough room to open a door, which may not be enough room to give you to work around a car to do proper paint correction or polishing. So definitely possible to do outside, just stay out of direct sun. C Squared asked, as a beginner, how many pads would I need and how often should I be changing them if I'm working on a small hatchback? So thanks for giving us an idea of the size of vehicle you're working on, because that's pretty critical in answering this type of question. But we briefly covered this last night. 2 to 4 pads per process is really your minimum. So on a hatchback, I'd say you can definitely get away with that. If you have the funds to buy 4 to 6 pads for the specific process you're doing, I would definitely do that, because I always err on the side of more pads being better. A lot of times when I'm doing a detail or a paint correction and my goal is to get that paint as perfect as I can, I would say on a couple of the cars I've done, I've worked with as many as like 10 to 12 pads per step or per process. That's on the high end. I also get a discount on our pads, so I don't have as much of a problem buying them, going through them as quickly. But if if you are trying to stay on a budget, at least 2 pads is going to be the way to go. On a hatchback, luckily you don't have too much ground to cover. But to piggyback on that, we had a couple questions about how often do you swap those pads out. As C-Squared also asked, so split the car up into half or fourths, depending on how many pads you have. If you're running with 2 pads, swap at the halfway point. If you have 4, switch up each quarter. Those examples, like I was just stating about using 10 to 12 pads per process, I'm swapping out every panel. On big panels, I might swap out halfway through the panel. The only reason I do that is because fresh pads get results faster, so it can speed up the work for you, especially if you're going after something that has severe defects and you're doing a multi-step process. Spending more on pads and saving yourself time can often be beneficial, but a lot of it depends on what you're doing. And I'm on the spoiled side. I recognize that when it comes to having lots of pads available to me. So things to keep in mind. But
yes. Neil White asked, how do you determine the pads, microfiber versus foam? This is going to rely heavily on your test section and also the defects that you're working on and the surface. So assess the surface, do your test section, also take into consideration whether you're trying to get a 1-step correction or whether you're doing potentially a 2-step. Because if you're doing a 1-step, microfiber likely isn't going to be the option. Some surfaces you can get away with like a microfiber and an all-in-one, but most cases you would want to finish with a foam pad after that microfiber. So really just do a test section, see how a foam pad comes out, and if you need to bump up to that microfiber, that would be a good time to do so.
Yeah. While we're on the topic of pads, Superjet asked, how many pads do you go through in a regular sedan versus a truck? So good comparison to build off of C-Squared's question that we just answered. A regular sedan or a hatchback like C-Squared asked about, you're going to be in that 2 to 4 range per process again. So if you're doing 2 steps, that'll be 4 to 8 pads total. 2 to 4 per process. On a truck or a big SUV, I would say 4 to 6 is going to be best case scenario. Again, these are recommendations. Yes, you can get away with using fewer pads, but you might realize it's going to take you a little longer to get results. Cleaning the pads in between panels is always recommended regardless of how many you're using, but specifically be more diligent about cleaning if you're trying to stretch pads further. So if you're using fewer, make sure you pick up a pad brush or have an air nozzle with compressed air readily available to you, and every single panel blow the pads off. I really have gotten into the habit of doing it every time I pull the orbital off the paint. So if I'm moving on to a new section and even on the same panel, I'm going to clean the pad and keep going. It doesn't take much time, and it really helps prolong the life of that pad during the job and get you consistent, quick results.
Yes. David Suggs asked, are there any pads that could help clean a shower? Absolutely, depending on the surface that you're working on. If you have like glass shower doors, you would want to use our glass polish and the glass polishing pads. I personally have plastic sidings around the shower that get pretty spotted up, and so for that I really love an all-in-one, like ceramic all-in-one with like an orange foam pad. But yeah, there's definitely options depending on the surface that you're working on.
Jay Maynard asked, should the pads return to their original color after cleaning? Mine always seem to get lighter. That's pretty normal. I'd say, as the pads become used and you clean them, I think Jay's referring to cleaning the pad after you've used it, to where you're washing it with microfiber and foam pad cleaner. The pads get, I don't want to say abused, but they get worn as you're using them on a vehicle, so they are going to lighten up a little bit. The color of the product, most of our creams are a light color or white. and they're gonna, if you're not getting that all the way out of the pad, that may cause it to look a little bit lighter. But it's totally normal for them to look a little more pale as you clean them.
Yeah, or
than when
lighter
they're new.
pads. Sorry,
Yeah.
lighter pads like the yellow foam, using like finishing sealant, for example, you'll see them kind of get a little dingy looking almost.
Yeah,
And that's just
totally normal.
remnants of the product.
Yeah. One way that you can help keep your pads in better condition long term, you don't really need to do this with the products that don't have protection in them, but if you're using a protectant like finishing sealant, ceramic liquid wax 3-in-1, designate pads specifically to those products. Mark them on the back or on the side in Sharpie, and use. Make sure you grab one of those pads to use when you're applying the protectant, and that'll help keep your other pads looking better long term.
Yes. Andrew M. asked, I use a cheap polisher right now, but currently looking at a Griot's one. Which one do you recommend for a semi-basic user? I think the G9 is a perfect entry level. That's going to cover the larger areas effectively. Can get into some contours depending. Definitely not going to be the most efficient for tight contours, but that's a good middle of the road, basic, get you started, and then you can increase your, I almost said clientele. You can get a G8 as well.
Increase your repertoire, your
Yeah,
arsenal.
sure.
I always like to, or not always, but I tend to like to recommend to people that are starting out to swap to the 5-inch backing plate as well, because that can, if you're only buying one tool, you don't want to invest into one of the smaller platforms quite yet. Putting a 5-inch backing plate on the G9 and using those 5-inch pads is going to give you a little more versatility in making it easier to reach into some of those more compact, tighter areas or some of those trickier contours. The 6-inch is great at covering ground. I do use that size, but I tend to lean towards the 5-inch plates and pads because a lot of modern vehicles, you have lots of tricky spots, so that size is going to be a little more versatile. And that's a great way to add some versatility and kind of bridge the gap while you're saving up to buy a smaller platform, or if you're just getting into it, while you decide how often you're going to need that sort of thing. The backing plates, I think, are $20 for the 5-inch plate, and then you just order that pad size. They're easy to swap out. It's a good upgrade.
Yes. Chris Christensen asked, is the air pulse gun good for cleaning or blowing out pads? Yes, that is a perfect use for that tool. And then Neil White asked, do the brushes ever wear out? And they will wear out over time. They have a certain run time. I believe it's 400 plus hours. But after use, you will see those wear out and need to be replaced at some point. And we do offer those as replacements, so you could definitely call our customer service line, or we do send you an extra pair with the orbital when you buy it.
Yep. Rachel Drives Clean Cars said, I feel like my white fast correcting foam pads load up with product or material more easily than orange correcting pads. Is this expected? Yeah, I'd say that's pretty normal. It's a higher density foam, so it can load up a little bit more. You shouldn't have issues with not being able to clean that out though. So again, I like to recommend compressed air over the pad brush, or both. I've definitely used both for situations where I'm getting a little more buildup. Sometimes it can also depend on the paint that you're working on. Softer paints will tend to cause more buildup in your pads than a harder paint surface will. So a couple things to look out for there. And then make sure you're not using the product excessively. You could reduce the amount that you're putting on in between sections or passes to make sure that you're not loading it up faster than you need to.
Yes. David Wilson asked, I know that there's a pad cleaner. Do you use that on the orbital or as a soak? We do have our microfiber and foam pad cleaner, which helps to break down and release waxes and polish residues from pads. So typically what I would recommend, you wouldn't use this on the orbital to answer that question. But what I would recommend is soaking your pads in warm or hot water for about 20 minutes, coming in. That's just going to help soften everything up. That's a completely optional step, but you want to fill a sink with water, dunk the pad in there, spray some of the microfiber and foam pad cleaner onto the pad, and then kind of work it in and massage it. It'll get a little bit sudsy, rinse it, and make sure that the product is fully removed from the pad, and also that when you're rinsing it, it's running clear. And then my personal favorite step is to then put them in our washer on just a spin and rinse cycle. That helps make sure that not only did you get all that product out, but you also got all that product residue out, and that just further ensures that you're not going to have dried product in there that's causing dusting later.
Yeah, or wash them on an actual wash cycle with some more microfiber and foam pad cleaner. I know that's normally what I do, or what we recommend to like our team in the store when they're cleaning pads from our car care school, because it just guarantees a cleaner result at the end. And can save you a little bit of time, so you don't have to spend quite as much time agitating and kneading them out to get them perfect. Get the majority out by hand and then throw them in the washing machine. Don't machine dry your pads though. I think that's something you could get away with it, but I wouldn't recommend it, as it'll oftentimes cause the pads to kind of curl up and can make the backing pill a little bit, and then they don't adhere to your orbital quite as well. So, Tim Callahan asked, wool versus microfiber versus white FCC foam pad. So great question. Those are definitely three kind of similarly geared pads in that they're all on the aggressive end of the spectrum. Microfiber tends to be my personal favorite of the three. I will say my favorite use for the white fast correcting foam is for heavily oxidized surfaces, especially single stage, but also clear coat. If you have lots of oxidation, from all the cars that I've done, that white foam seems to cut through it the best in a lot of scenarios. Microfiber versus wool, that's a tough one. When they're new, especially, wool, you're gonna tend to get more debris flying off of it. You're gonna get little pieces of wool that fly off the pad, whereas you're not gonna get that with the microfiber. The wool will run a little cooler than the microfiber though, so it can be a more aggressive option than foam without going quite as aggressive and creating quite as much heat as the microfiber can. So a few differences there. Wool and microfiber are gonna be a very close competition as far as the cutting ability goes. I think with the edge going to microfiber. I love the microfiber pads. Anytime I'm doing a two-step, that's almost always my first step, is our microfiber, Boss microfiber pads with fast correcting cream, and then finish up with a lighter foam and one of your finishing products. But yeah, differences there. I would say try out wool and microfiber both. Those are both going to be more aggressive than the white fast correcting foam, to be clear. The white foam will be the most aggressive of the foams, but slightly less so than either of those fiber pads.
Yes. Ruger's World asked, so you would recommend the yellow pad for us rookies? The yellow pad isn't a bad option for beginners, but it's not the one that you should stick with necessarily. Each of the pads are gonna be fine. I'd say the area that you're gonna have more trouble with is selecting the right tool. Selecting a tool you're not equipped to use, say that you've never used an orbital before, for example, and you're jumping right into a long throw, that has more potential of causing issues for you than the pad. So I would say yellow pad is fine, orange foam is fine, microfiber even is going to be fine. It just mainly, I would say, depends on the technique that you're using and the tool that you've selected.
Yeah, I think we mentioned this a little bit at the beginning when we were talking about the most common or versatile pad. If you're just starting out, you can't go wrong with the orange foam pad. I was referring to the yellow pad last night, or on Wednesday, excuse me, as one of our more underrated foams. I like to use it a lot when I'm doing a two-step system as my second step, my finishing step. I love that yellow pad for that second step. But if you're doing a single step or an all-in-one, you're not necessarily going to want to use that yellow pad, because it's going to be a little, might be not always, but might be a little too light for you to get the results you want to get. So
yeah, I just realized there's a question, like 2 questions down from him saying, I have a 3-year-old Mazda with soft paint and was a bit worried about using the orange pad. So I think that's the context that he's asking that question in. And you shouldn't have any problem using the orange pad on that paint, but it really is going to come down to that test section.
Yep. Oh, favorite recipe for a car wrapped in 3M PPF. Doing vehicles that are fully covered in paint protection film can be a bear depending on the condition of that film. You're going to tend to want to err on the lighter side of things and not go too aggressive, or you can haze up the paint protection film. So in most scenarios, the most aggressive I would go is our correcting cream on an orange foam pad. Whole car with PPF, not my personal favorite job to do. I would definitely charge a little bit more for that if you're doing it for a customer, because you're gonna have a little bit harder time wiping product off and things like that. Yeah, I'd do a test section for sure, test in a small and conspicuous area before you're going after full panels to make sure the process that you're using is not only getting good results, but not causing any issues. Again, depending on the age of the paint protection film, you can run into problems when polishing it. So be sure to test a small section before you get after it.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't cook for my cars, but he has a favorite recipe. Okay, whatever.
Nice.
Jace Joshua asked what causes dusting. There's a few factors that can cause this. One is going to be overworking your product. So if you're continuing to work a section for an extensive amount of passes, that can cause the product to be overworked and begin to dry. Working in a hot environment can cause the product to dry quicker and cause dusting. Subpar formulation, so like there are competitors that no matter how easily, I'm trying to word this delicately, no matter how easily you take it, you very likely will see some dusting, and that's just a nature of that formula. But also, we spoke to cleaning pads earlier, and it could also be that there's dust in the actual pad that didn't get cleaned out, and so that product dried and is now creating dust. So there's a lot of different factors that can cause it.
Yeah, we got a couple questions about waffle pads. BTBD asked, why do you make waffle pad? From what I understand, they offer less resistance over the surface, and the surface is cooler.
We prefer pancake pads.
Pancakes versus waffles, that's a tough argument out there. But we don't make a waffle pad because we, in all of our testing, have not seen any benefits over the waffle design versus a standard flat face pad. So I think it's really gonna depend on the quality of foam, more so than waffle versus a flat face pad. Like Stevie mentioned last night, all of our pads are reticulated or open cell foam, which aids in cooling much more than a waffle design is gonna do so. When you also think about it, any pressure you're applying, even just the weight of the machine, is going to flatten out any waffle pattern and create a flat surface anyways. So, you be the judge. Use what you like to use for sure. We do recommend using our pads with our Boss creams and orbitals for optimal results, because we can't guarantee that another manufacturer's pads are going to be the correct weight to be balanced with our backing plates and the counterbalances on our machines. We do a lot of testing with our pads when developing our machines to ensure that they deliver, looking for the right word there, the smoothest operation possible. So if you're using other manufacturers' pads, you may experience more vibration, things like that with our tools.
C Squared asked another great question. Would correcting cream be a better choice than ceramic all-in-one if I'm planning on applying ceramic liquid wax after? We always get questions about this, so I think it's important to continue to provide this answer and this school of thought, if you will. But when you're layering protections of any kind, especially like that in the ceramic all-in-one and ceramic liquid wax, You want to keep in mind that the product that you apply first, you're going to get the durability of that protectant, and whatever you put on top of that is what you're going to see the characteristics of. So while these are both ceramic protectants, you might think, okay, I'm getting ceramic durability and ceramic explosive repellency. What's the problem? The ceramic liquid wax is actually a bit more durable than the ceramic all-in-one protectant. And so because of that, I wouldn't recommend it, just because you're going to be limiting that extreme durability of the ceramic liquid wax that you're putting on top of that. That's not to say that you're only going to get a couple months if you do that. You're still going to get that great durability that you would get from the ceramic all-in-one. It's just not going to be as durable because of that layering. So personally, I would stick with, say, correcting cream as you mentioned, or even perfecting cream if you're only needing a mild polish, and then going to the ceramic liquid wax.
Yep, great answer. Where'd it go?
Great question too.
Joshua asked, what causes dusting?
I just answered that.
You did?
Sorry.
Okay, sorry. I was sitting here getting lost in the questions. Another good one that I specifically liked. How does Griot determine what to sell in stores versus the website? The only store that we determine everything that we sell in is our own retail store here in Tacoma. All of the national retailers, we have some say in that we pitch them products to sell. If it were up to us, they would sell all of our products, but unfortunately that is not entirely up to us. They decide what of our products they sell. So again, if we had it our way, they would sell our entire line, but unfortunately we don't, and they have a little more hand in that decision than we do. So we do pitch them the products that we think will do the best in their stores. You'll tend to see more of our bread and butter when it comes to our most commonly used products. Brilliantly finished car wash, speed shine, black shine tire dressing, black satin, interior cleaner, interior detailer. Those products that appeal to the masses and not necessarily someone that is as heavy into detailing as all of you might be. So yeah. If it were up to us, they'd sell it all, but unfortunately it's not entirely up to us. One way that you guys can help is by talking to the managers at your local national retailers, whether it be AutoZone, Advanced Auto Parts, or O'Reilly's, or Napa, or wherever else you might see our products, and tell them what you want to see and what you're really interested in. That can definitely help drum up the demand for us to then get that product placed. So
Yes. Eric O said, I have some Boss pads and creams that have been boxed up for about a decade. Are they still usable? The creams are still emulsified. I think that that's kind of a gray area. I can't say yes or no right here, but the pads are perfectly fine to use. The creams, I know you said they're still emulsified, but the bottles are opaque, and I'd say the biggest probable issue that you might have with those is that the actual abrasive particle settling to the bottom. So what I would recommend is shaking them really well to get that all mixed back in, and then testing a small section. You're not going to have to worry about causing any damage to the panel that you're working on. It's just not going to be as user-friendly potentially if you are having issues. So just test a small section, see how it turns out. If it's really weird working, if maybe it's not having smooth emulsion flow, so it's kind of like drying up a little bit, or it's hard to wipe off, then just replace that product. If you're experiencing great results and it's fine to use, then you're perfectly fine to continue using it. All of our liquids, we do say have a 5-year shelf life, but that really depends on how they're stored. And then also sometimes you may even get longer than that. So there's really no hard and fast answer. Just shake it really well, test it, and see how it's performing.
Keeping the products, the liquids, in a stable environment is pretty essential. As with most liquids, if you have drastic swings from freezing temps to very hot temperatures throughout the year, and they're out in your garage where you're getting all sorts of exposure, you're probably going to run into products going bad a little bit faster. So try and keep them in a stable environment if you can. Tote them up and take them inside if you get really cold temps in the winter or really hot temperatures in the summer in your garage. Enthusiast asks, do you only panel prep after polishing or before too? You didn't answer this one yet, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So when he's talking about panel prep, he's referring to using products like Surface Prep Cleanser. We didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about this yesterday, but this is an awesome product for use during or after the polishing or paint correction steps. You can use it before as well, but typically it's not necessary before unless you're using an all-in-one for your polishing step where you're also applying protection. So Surface Prep Cleanser will remove silicone residues, old protectants, any sort of polishing oil residue, compound residues. It's great for removing dust from the surface, like polishing dust, excuse me. All sorts of stuff that you don't want on there before you lay down your protection. This ensures that your protection is going onto a completely bare surface. These types of products are essential when you're applying ceramic products, specifically coatings, to give you maximum durability and prevent any sort of appearance issues after you lay those products down. Using Surface Prep Cleanser prior to application of really all of our protectants, but specifically ceramic liquid wax, ceramic all-in-one, and ceramic 3-in-1. It's going to ensure that you don't get any weird filminess or help reduce streaks when you're applying those, because they're going directly onto completely bare, clean paint. So I always recommend it at the very least after you've polished or done paint correction prior to applying any sort of protection. It's also hugely beneficial if you're having issues wiping off any of the liquid products during your polishing or paint correction steps, or if you're working on what I call like sticky paint. Some paint types just tend to be harder to wipe product off of. This product will make your life a lot easier. You don't need a lot, just a spritz or two per section, and then wipe it up with your towel. Of course, make sure that you're also rotating towels as you go so that you're not getting too much product built up on the towel. But great secret weapon. It can be an added step, but it's a quick one, and it's going to make your later steps much quicker and easier. Overall, just make your life easier. It's also great for cleaning exterior glass when you're done with polishing or applying protection. So
Yes.
good go-to.
We had a question from Bruce Kirk. After applying the iron and fallout remover, should you wash the car again before you do the clay bar? You will want to rinse the iron and fallout remover off, but you should have already washed the car prior to using the iron and fallout also to remove any like filth and soiling. So ideally you would wash to remove the dirt, apply the iron and fallout remover either via the spray bottle or foam cannon is a really great way to use that. And then rinse that off, but then you wouldn't need to wash again before you clay.
Mm-hmm. Paul Rivard asked, I have a question about ceramic 3-in-1 wax. I'm going to assume you're talking about ceramic all-in-one wax. He then goes on to say, when I apply with a buffer, then buff off, I still see buffer marks on the surface and have to go over with a detailer and buff again. What am I doing wrong? So ceramic all-in-one wax, because it has that durable protectant, does have some limitations in that it doesn't have an infinite buffing cycle. If you work it too hard, either run it at too high of a speed with too much pressure, or try to do too many passes to where you're working it on the surface for a long time.
Or I've even had people that polish an entire door instead of working in smaller sections.
Yep.
So they're essentially allowing the product to dry by the time they come to wipe it off.
Yep, exactly. You're gonna run into those problems where you see buffer marks or buffer trails after you wipe off the residue. So that product is an immediate wipe off. So you do a section, wipe the residue off. Do a section, wipe the residue off. You don't want to leave it on the surface for very long. Like Stevie said, if you're doing too large of a section, where you started is going to have been on the surface for a few minutes, maybe even up to 5 or 10, depending on how long you're working. But by the time you finish that panel and you go to wipe it off. So one thing I've found, if I'm running it a little harder or trying to do a larger area, I'll do that area as I normally would, and then I'll turn the machine down to 3 or 4 and just quickly pass over that whole area or whole panel, and then immediately wipe it off right after, so that you're essentially reactivating the product and then quickly wiping it off. That will help reduce the risk of those buffer trails.
Yes. Kevin Presgay asked, what is the best way to clean water spots? I thought this is a perfect opportunity to talk about water spot remover. So it really depends on the severity of these water spots and how long they've been on the surface. The vehicle that we were working on Wednesday on the live, those water spots had been on there for probably about a month. So they're pretty bad and etched in. Not only that, but they were from irrigation system sprinklers that have some really nasty stuff in there. So they were very bad. But depending on how fresh the water spots are, you may be able to get away with just water spot remover and not need to polish. But the longer those sit on there, and if you don't get to them fairly quickly, then you will probably need to polish. The severity of the polish is going to depend on the severity of the water spots.
For sure. A couple questions about finishing sealant specifically, which we didn't talk about at all, so I'm going to answer these real quick. Enthusiast asked, you guys have the Boss finishing sealant. Would the ceramic all-in-one be a replacement for that, since it's the same type of product but with a more stout protection package? Yes, definitely. Ceramic all-in-one is a suitable replacement in your process for finishing sealant. The only caveat to that is that finishing sealant is going to be a little lighter. So for really soft paint finishes, finishing sealant may give you a slightly better finish than ceramic all-in-one would. It has a finer abrasive in it, so it's going to tend to finish down better. Now, in most paints, you're not going to really necessarily notice a difference between the finish of the two, but in a soft, dark paint finish, you may. So keep that in mind. And then Tim Callahan asked, does finishing sealant have any abrasive, or is it purely a sealant? And Perfecting Cream is the last one for correction.
Real quick, just to piggyback on the back of that, also the finishing sealant has that longer working cycle and the better lubricity, so you're able to use that with a long throw orbital, whereas you wouldn't want to use the ceramic all-in-one with a long throw. Sorry if you already.
I've used ceramic all-in-one with a long throw.
Well, you're going to have a better time using it with a long throw
You can use it
orbital.
fine
How
with
about
a
that?
long throw. Yeah, just don't go too high of speed or too aggressive, but yeah, really regardless of the tool you're using. Tim Callahan says, does finishing sealant have any abrasive, or is it purely sealant? And Perfecting Cream is the last one for correction. Second part of your question answered. The first part, Perfecting Cream is the last one. Well, sorry, excuse me. Perfecting Cream is the last one that's just abrasive. Finishing sealant does have abrasive in it and can be used, to remove light haze, very fine defects at the end of a polishing step. So they both have abrasive. Finishing sealant is not purely sealant.
Yes. MSGTED01. Do you recommend a clay bar, towel, or mitt? I think that each of these have individual instances where you would specifically lean towards one or the other, but there's also not a right or wrong answer or one that's best for all scenarios. I personally prefer the clay bar because I'm very visually rewarded. I like to see the contaminants that I'm pulling out, but that can also be great on more delicate paint that could potentially, especially like flat black finishes. Typically those will mar a little easier, and especially if you're putting more pressure in with the synthetic tools, you can definitely experience that. So I would say on more delicate surfaces, you might prefer a traditional clay bar, or if you are not in a rush and you just want to kind of take your time and enjoy the experience, and you are visually rewarded like me, the traditional clay bar is great. You can also kind of conform that into certain like curves and areas pretty easily, so that's another benefit of that. As far as the synthetic options, as far as the mitt and the Brilliant Finish synthetic clay, those also are conformable. They're going to be more durable. They don't absorb contaminants, so if you were to drop one of those on the ground, you're able to continue using that, whereas with the clay bar, you'd have to toss it. They are going to save you a lot of time. They also give you more options of lubricants that you can use. But then also, we don't really talk about the towel a whole lot, but the towel is going to be really great for especially like really intricate and weird areas. So like I've used it on like really tight contours and curves. I've used it on like front bumpers that are really intricate and have all these little spots. Because it is a towel, you can kind of fold it and contort it into whatever area that you need to easily get into those. Of course, it's also effective on the rest of the surfaces. But there's no one right answer. It's really going to come down to how you're using it.
That's a good one.
Should we announce a giveaway?
Can't forget our giveaway.
Yeah.
You read my mind. So I think we selected C Squared, who I'm also going to read his last question, or one of his questions as our last question. I've never used a polisher before. Do I have to do anything if my car has rock chips on the front bumper and hood? So no, you don't. That's a common question that we get, like how do you polish over rock chips? Do you stay away from them? Typically there's going to be no worries just going over them. You know, you're going to still want to get those painted surfaces where you might have chips polished. It can sometimes, depending on how deep or severe the chips are, it can help, you know, hide light chips or take some of the color out of them, which will help minimize them. But you're never going to get rock chips out completely, unfortunately, just by polishing. But yeah, you can go right over them with your polishing steps. No need to worry. I have found sometimes vehicles with heavily chipped front ends, you may get some more polish residue that builds up in those rock chips. So using a product like Surface Prep Cleanser to aid and wipe off will help ensure that you're getting all the residue out of those chips.
Yeah, I've also seen vehicles, I don't know why, but I see this on older vehicles more so than newer, but they have just really aggressive rock chips, and maybe it's because they've just been sitting and nothing's been done about it and there's no protection on there. But they'll kind of have these rough edges around that rock chip, and if that's the case, you don't necessarily have to worry about polishing over them usually, but sometimes they can be a little hard on the foam pad that you're using, so just bear that in mind. So if that's the case, I would recommend starting on the higher sections of the vehicle that don't have rock chips. So for example, the part of the hood closer to the windshield, and work your way down the nose. Just knowing that that may potentially compromise the integrity of your pad if it is like a rough, jagged edge.
So C Squared, email us at winners@griotsgarage.com for your giveaway prize. Sounds like you said you've never used polisher before, so hopefully you don't have one yet, because we're going to give you one. So you'll get that G9 two-step ceramic kit. It's also a good reminder to get on the website if you didn't win our giveaway and use that $50 off G9 and G9 kit sale. Great way to save some money. Probably the most aggressive savings we've ever offered for the G9 and those G9 kits. So again, you have 2 days left to go on and celebrate that 5 years of G9 promotion, save $50. So pretty solid deal.
And as a reminder, there's no code for that. You just go purchase those kits. They're discounted already for that sale.
Just add it to your cart. As always, we appreciate your guys' questions. Tons of great engagement during the live this week. Hard to get to it all, even in an additional 45-minute segment. But we always love answering your guys' questions, so please keep continuing to ask them. Even if we didn't specifically get to them today, hopefully we will get to them in a future live. And I think I got an idea from one of these questions for a future live on protection specifically. So I don't think we've ever done a live that was specifically about all of our protection options and how we apply them. So maybe that will be next month, since I don't think we have a topic planned yet. But keep an eye out, hit the notification bell so you don't miss our announcement for our October live date and all of our other YouTube content. Of course, if you're not already, get down there and subscribe. Give us a quick thumbs up. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram so you don't miss a thing. Have fun in your garage.
Have fun in your garage.